Chapter 6. The haft of the arrow had been feathered with one of the eagle's own plumes. We often give our enemies the means of our own destruction. Aesop, the Eagle and the Arrow. The temple to Odin appeared far more benign in reality than it had in Larsen's dream. The ivy which covered its walls was shaped and tended, though cruel northern winds battered the vines flatter on one side than the other. Age claimed its toll in cracks, discolorations, and grime. Yet someone had taken the time to nurture bluebells at its foundation, despite soil so solidly frozen it scarcely supported the scraggly vegetables, which were the sustenance of Oracle and acolytes. Larsen paced fretfully between Galnar and Silm. The shock of Brender's death had faded, replaced by memories of the demon in his nightmare. Repeatedly he replayed the scene in his mind. Each time the shapeless shadow form sprang from the Oracle's swirling mass of flame, shredding Silm's body with talons sharp as steel, and always Larsen's defense came too late to save his beloved. Silm knocked on the temple door. The heavy wooden panel muffled sounds nearly to silence. It was opened almost instantly by a young man who ushered Larsen and his companions inside. He wore a clean gray cloak. Lines of hardship marred his features, but his lips curled in an amiable smile. He flicked away his hood, and hair the color of goldenrod fell to his shoulders. "Have you come to pay homage?" Silm tapped the base of her dragon staff against the earthen floor. "We wish to see the Oracle." The acolyte's expression grew grave. He led his new charges past groups of priests engaged in ritual. Light spilled through numerous windows, muted to gray haze by cruelly thick-set glass. Other acolytes nodded pleasantly as they passed, and Larsen found nothing inherently threatening about the Temple of Odin. Still, the memory of his nightmare racked his spine with shivers, and anxiety closed him in an icy grip. The acolyte led Larsen and his companions past a row of 3 stone altars. The elf paused by the last, attracted by a stain dark as spilled wine. Closer inspection revealed the faint odor of death. Larsen flinched back with a small cry and crashed against Galnar. The Kensi turned swiftly and followed Larsen's horrified gaze. He answered the unspoken question in a whisper. "War casualties, Alarum. Calm down. You've seen blood before." He caught the elf by a cloak sleeve and hauled him through a silver-threaded curtain, identical to the one in a dream inspired by Brahman. In the adjoining room, the Oracle sat before her marble table. As Larsen, Silm, and Galnar stepped through the curtain, she raised her red-maned head. One blue eye examined her visitors with withering disdain. Beside it, a scarred socket gave mute testimony to the traumatic loss of her other eye. Leery of the Oracle's disfigured and condemning features, Larsen stared at the viewing stone before her. In the dream, he had thought the gemstone a diamond. Closer, he recognized it as a nearly transparent, oval-shaped block of quartz. Yet some work of nature or magic gave it the strange, eye-like configuration of green irised black. The Oracle laced her long finger on the table. Red hair streaked her knuckles like blood. "Welcome, Lady Silm, Sapphire rank." Her eye met Larsen and Galnar in turn, but she extended them no greeting. "You have a question for my divination? Come forward." Larsen drew his sword and stepped forward with Silm. He poised a half stride before and to the right of the sorceress. His hands shook against Valvanir's hilt. His tongue went dry as cotton. Hyper alert, Larsen recognized Silm's drooping eyelids and shoulders, and knew the enchantments she had channeled against Brender had heavily tapped her physical energy. The Oracle's face went pale with a strange combination of anger and fear. "I'll not be threatened," she said softly. "There shall be no bare steel in my chamber." Galnar gripped Larsen's sword arm. "What's the matter with you?" he asked in a chastising whisper. "You've been acting strangely since we entered the temple." Larsen sheathed Valvanir reluctantly. His reply was an anxious plea. "Just watch Silm, please?" Kensi Galnar scowled in offense, but he held his tongue with the subtlety of a master. "I always do," he answered after a moment. To Larsen's relief, his instructor paced to Silm's other side. The Oracle waited until the men completed their exchange, then continued as if the disturbance had never occurred. "Your query, Dragon Mage." Silm's words slurred slightly, as if the mere effort of gathering breath taxed her remaining strength. "Please, lady, my question concerns Alarim's sword, a quest, and the tranquility of Midgard. Will hurling Valvanir in the hellspring of Helvgrbr bring rescue or ruin to the gods of law and men?" The oracle bent her head over the crystal, and her endless sea of hair covered the scrying stone like a curtain. Larson watched in horror as her wrinkled hand passed twice above the gemstone. He tried to loose the muscles coiled in pain by tension. Silm yawned and rubbed fatigue from her eyes. Larson voiced a staccato grunt and edged closer to the sorceress. The oracle sat as still as death. Minutes dragged like hours. By the time the oracle looked up from her device, Larson had nervously worked his way directly in front of Silm. The oracle's lips framed a smug smile which disappeared as she addressed Silm. "Have no fear, sorceress. Your quest is sanctioned. But quickly now. Time runs short." Silm looked around Larson with newfound energy, as if suddenly freed of some grave responsibility. "Thank you, lady. Your efforts may have saved our world from chaos. May Odin continue to grace you with his favor. And Vidar you." The oracle returned the compliment in kind. Irony made Silm wince. She turned, strode across the chamber, and passed through the shimmering curtain, with Galinar at her heels. Larson retreated with more caution, gaze locked mistrustfully on the oracle whose lips pursed in antagonizing confidence. Wired and eager to desert the red-haired seer, who had become so abruptly lethal in his nightmare, Larson scrambled through the cloth slit. He jostled against Galinar in his haste. The Kensi rolled his eyes with fading indulgence, and followed Silm around the milling acolytes. His glares grew less tolerant when Larson twice trod on his heels in his rush to vacate the temple to Odin. Once they stepped from the great interior of the building to the pleasure of afternoon, Larson loosed a shuddering sigh of relief. Even the biting wind seemed preferable to another moment of emotional agitation, especially to an elf impervious to winter's chill. Larson and his companions mounted their horses. 10 minutes into their journey back toward the River Silk, Larson shed the last of his apprehension and muttered to himself in triumph, "The half-breed ain't as all-powerful as he thought." Silm caught his arm. "Did you say something?" Larson shook his head in denial. Then, seeing no reason to hide the truth from Silm any longer, he explained, "Brahmin came to me in a dream and promised violence if we contacted the oracle. Idle threats, I'm certain, but just scary enough that I—" He broke off as Silm reined with an abruptness which sent her horse into a startled half-rear. "I thought I sensed his presence." Silm shaped her words with a self-accusatory anger. "But I blamed it on paranoia and weakness. Quickly now, the oracle may be endangered." She turned her steed and kicked it into a gallop back toward Odin's temple. Galinar whipped his horses about and reined after Silm. More accustomed to cars than horses, Larson clung to saddle and mane as his mount wheeled and followed his fellows at a run. They covered lost ground in minutes, stopping only to tether the horses. Silm rushed to the dooryard, her companions close behind. Without troubling to knock, she pushed open the temple door. Priests looked up in alarm, but the sorceress paid them no heed. At a trot, she led Galinar and Larson through the slit in the silver-threaded curtain. The oracle's chamber was as Larson remembered it from both dream and reality. Its dim, dank interior supported a marble block, on which the eye-like crystal lay balanced on an edge. Gray cloth drapes covered the room's 3 walls. Conspicuously absent was the oracle of Hargater. Larson waited by the slitted entrance, prepared for violence. Galinar stood in the center of the chamber, and his eyes followed Silm's anxious path. The sorceress peered behind the marble, paused a moment in confusion, then trotted to a far corner. She peeled aside a corner of the curtain which hid the back wall. Matched, gold-tasseled cords fell into her hand. When she pulled one, the cloth parted. Beyond, Larson and his companions saw a smaller chamber. Galinar strode around Silm and entered the room first. Larson crossed the scrying chamber in time to step around the curtain with Silm. Behind a writing desk and before a simple cot, a pallid body sprawled face downward on the floor. Red hair spread about the narrow shoulders and waist in a mass of tangles. "No," said Silm softly. Galinar eased the corpse to its back. The oracle's single eye was closed tight beside the massively scarred empty socket. Her breasts, thighs, and torso were violet with pooled blood. Though more familiar with rapid decomposition in the heat of Vietnam, Larson knew the oracle had been dead for several hours at least. The thought left him with a head-pounding certainty. The woman who had answered Silm's question and sanctioned their quest was not the oracle of Hargater. Galinar ushered his grieving companions back into the scrying room and pulled the curtain closed, leaving the oracle what little decency remained in death. Silm pressed her back to the marble table, laid her staff at her feet, and buried her face in her palms. Exhaustion from wasted enchantments and frustration preyed heavily on her remaining strength. She looked as vulnerable as a child. Larson lowered himself beside Silm and rested his arm across her sagging shoulders. What now? Silm sighed. All I dare believe of the false oracle's prophecy is the value of time. We still don't know how to free Vidar. I'm certain only that we mustn't surrender him to the Hellspring. She fell silent and still. Just as Larson convinced himself she had fallen asleep, she rallied internal energy and leaped to her feet. Silm knocked Larson aside and paced with the steady tread of a caged tiger. If fates or gods know the method of breaking Loki's spell, the answer lies in the stone of Hargater. She indicated the crystal. Anyone who understands its enchantments can tap its knowledge. And you? Asked Larson hopefully. Silm paused, hands against the marble. She shook her head. Dragon rank magic taps its caster's life energy. That's what makes it so powerful and desirable, and also dangerous. Devices like the gemstone are of no more use to me than crossbow bolts to a longbowman. I have the basic knowledge, but too many gaps exist to correctly glean information. Try at least. Larson rose. Silm caught his hands. Her palms left sweaty prints on the edge of the marble table. I can do better than try. Another in this room may have some of the knowledge I need. Alarum, did Vidar tell you why he can communicate only with you? Larson tried to recall. He said people from my world lack mind barriers. Silm dropped his hands, her eyes widening incredulously. None? Larson shrugged. I suppose. I don't even know what it means. For now, it means a way to link myself with Vidar. Silm's gaze dropped to the sword at Larson's hip. Together, we may fathom the workings of the Oracle's stone. Her cheeks colored slightly, but she continued eagerly. Alarum, can you hold your mind blank? My mind? Blank? No. He flinched back as the sorceress's request became clear. The thought that Silm might access his memories of murder made him lightheaded. My mind runs and lapses without my control. From moment to moment, I don't know if I'll find myself here or home, whether I'm experiencing reality, memory, or the inspired illusions of trapped gods and vicious warlocks. For me, Silm, blank is not a state of mind. Larson had quite forgotten Galinar stood behind him. Dickensi's husky voice made him jump. It is now, hero. Would you have us damn the world for your reluctance? Silm finished the appeal more gently. I require only that you keep people and places from your consciousness. Concentrate on naming foods or counting twigs, anything repetitive which requires channeling thought. Will you try it? I've no choice. Larson swallowed around a lump which grew in his throat. What do I have to do? Sit. Silm waved him to the floor. Larson sat, knees pressed to his chest. His hands trembled as he watched Silm reach for the crystal of Hargater. Wait! Silm paused. How do you know Brahman hasn't tampered with the stone, or replaced it with something evil? Silm seized the eye-like gem with an impatient toss of her head. This is Odin's temple. The oracle's scrying stone must be warded by law. A simple touch would maim or even kill Brahman. It would reflect his destructive magics. Any other attempt to remove it from the temple would require him to work it past a room full of priests. Silm lowered herself to the floor before Larson and placed the stone between them. Lay the sword across your legs. Larson complied reluctantly. Valventnir buzzed slightly against him, glowing with blue light. Silm, shouldn't we wait until you've had some rest? Silm locked her fingers between Larson's. Her voice became a low drone. No time. Brahman can trace us through the gaps in your mind. We don't want him to know we discovered his treachery. Silm let her eyes fall shut, her head lolled forward. Silm? What? Impatience made her curt. What if I can't control my thoughts? Her voice assumed a hiss of dry warning. Let's just hope you can. Her reply did nothing to reassure Larson. Near panic, he chose to conjugate verbs from his high school French lesson. Je suis, tu es, il est. Twin presences pressed against his mind with the banding grip of a headache. Vidar and Silm scuttled without direction, silent as mice in the jarring loops of Larson's flawed thought pattern. God and sorceress probed blindingly for one another, and Larson felt all too aware of their locations. Nous sommes, vous et ils sont. Gradually, Silm and Vidar closed a distance between their mental presences. Their union broke to a dazzling explosion of light, sparking one of Larson's frayed memories like a dried piece of kindling. Hurled into flashback, Larson stared at a mine crater the size of his bedroom back in the States. Then a barrier snapped into place with a force which broke the illusion. Threat carved into focus. Hold your thoughts. I've no power to rescue you again. Tu es, il est, no, avant. Larson plunged into his studies with desperate passion. The combined essence of Vidar and Silm wove drunkenly through his brain. A flurry of enchantments battered through consciousness, unsteady as fever. Vous avez, will hurling Velvetnir in the hellspring of Helvgrimr bring rescue or ruin to the gods of law and men? Silm's question echoed through Larson's mind, pulling him from his furious attempts at conjugations. Smoke eddied like car exhaust. The fused presence gasped in triumph, then hissed in fury as the haze peeled away like scalded wax without answer. Frustration settled in Larson's mind, dimmed to resolution. Silm/Vidar gathered energy, unwittingly tapping him in the process. Reference folded in nightmarish magics and wrapped him in drugged awareness. Fog, thick as earth, warped vision. Another alien presence winked to life to Larson's already overcrowded mind. Destroying a sword heralds Vidar's death. Beware! Such an action will doom the world to chaos. Sanity flickered. Tu veux, il est, no avant, vous allez, il allant. Emotion pervaded him to a perfect mixture of outrage and concern. Silm/Vidar coiled like a cat prepared to spring. Magic formed a tense ball in Larson's mind, crushing aside fragile circuits of memory. Pain blurred thought to blackness. Reality exploded to madness. A painted forest replaced the emptiness of Larson's eye-closed world. He walked between Silm and Vidar, beneath the mercilessly hot sun. Blue haze ringed the sorceress, and the gods shone with a golden glory. Where the hell? Thought Larson. Oh, no faisant. The syllables warped to nonsense. Suddenly, a woman tall as a watchtower stepped from the brush, directly in his path. Larson recoiled. The life auras of god and sorceress fused to glaring green. Who are you? Demanded Silm boldly. I am Skuld, Future. The giantess's voice rattled trees. In what cause have you summoned me, Silm Sapphire Rank? The cause of men and gods, Silm replied nearly as loud. Should chaos claim this world, there shall be no law, nor time, nor knowledge. You and your sister fates would perish. Her entreaty rolled like thunder through the silence of the forest. How must we free Vidar from imprisonment? A breeze rose and fell again. Several seconds passed before Larson recognized the wind as the breath of the giantess Skuld. Your fears are founded, Lady Silm. Your quest is honorable, though it brings doom upon others, men and women of my domain, those ruled by one of your companions, and beloved by the other. It is not my place to judge your task nor prevent it. The answer to your question lies with my sisters. Skuld marched back into the forest, trampling trees like matchsticks. The giantess's prophecy sounded strange to Larson's numbed mind. How could rescuing men from chaos doom them for the future? Before he found time to ponder the question, another woman shouldered between the trees. She looked sufficiently like Skuld to be her sister, yet not similar enough to be a twin. I am Verdandi, the giantess said, though no one asked her name. I hold title to the present. Your query has gone beyond my realm to the past. I can tell you only that your quest stands contested by a god and a half-breed with the power to destroy you. Swiftly, she returned to the forest. Cold sweat ran down Larson's back, and he shook with chills despite the heat. The third sister of fate glided from the tangled brush. Vertigo transformed her to a blur, which sharpened slowly to detail. She was obviously the eldest of the giantesses, smaller, withered, face puckered with burdens transferred from her sisters by time. I am Erder, keeper of the past and the understanding of Odin. It is I who added the final provision to Loki's spell, and I who shall reveal that knowledge to you. To free my lord Vidar, the elf must claim Loki's life with the blade Velvetnir. Shock battered Larson, obscured Erder in glare. Silm's scream pierced his mind like a spear, jarring loose a wild memory. The sound transformed to the shrill whine of jets. Even as Larson located the blood-red afterburners of the paired phantoms, he recognized his surroundings. He traveled a familiar road in the Mekong Delta. Some distance ahead, a dozen buddies in cami paused in horror as they discovered the jet's target was the same village which had, moments before, been their destination. The lead jet passed over the village. A raging column of flame consumed grass huts and villagers without mercy. Panic screams made Larson cringe. Even as the gasoline fumes pinched his nose, he realized he was neither in flashback nor alone. The dry crackle of gathering magics made him whirl towards Silm and Vidar. Oh my god, Silm, no! His warning came too late. Sorceries howled past his ear with all the inhuman speed of the phantoms. Bluish magics impacted the trailing jet and broke to a savage explosion of emerald. Shards of twisted steel rained to earth. Larson's sinews went taut with shock. He could only suppose Silm saw the jets as dragons, swooping upon an innocent town. Ahead on the road, the camouflage men dropped as one to the ground. Suddenly, Larson knew he and his otherworld companions had become the enemy. "Down!" hollered Larson. He dove into the roadside ditch. Gunfire popped and sputtered around him, sounding oddly impotent after the scourge of napalm and the thunderclap of Silm's spell. With no means of desire to return fire on his buddies, Larson flattened to the dirt without recourse. What have I done? Worried over the ignorance of his alien companions, he forced his gaze toward the road. Vidar and Silm stood behind a shimmering curtain, which reflected bullets like a wall. The oddity of their magical defense was not lost on the Americans. One yelled, "Holy fucking God!" Silm began a new incantation. Dark mist sproiled from her fingertips. A praying glow flickered around the enchantress and winked out like a spent candle. As Silm drained her life energy, she fell in a soundless faint. "Silm!" screamed Larson. The sorceress lay still within her magical shield, but her final spell was cast. Wizardry rolled out along the road like a living ball of fire. The men in cami dodged from the path of the sorceries with startled cries, and, from over the burning village, Larson caught sight of the returning phantom. Faster than its own report, the jet glided toward them in vengeful silence. "No!" Larson hollered. Smoke from the smoldering village swirled like ghosts into the phantom's twin intakes. Larson lay frozen in terror. A rocket dropped from beneath the jet, plummeted, then shot forward with a speed which outdistanced the plane. Before Larson could scream, the missile crashed to ground with a blast of red-orange. Its explosion seems to shatter Earth. Though the magical shield contained most of its impact, force crashed against Larson's head and knocked him to oblivion. Larson awakens to utter darkness. Screams of terror ripped from his lungs and reverberated like distant answers. Throat raw, he felt the silence and recognized the slosh of running water. The rasp of a sword scraping from its sheath restored his rationality. Larson struggled to legs, stiff with disuse. His hand closed about Valvetnir's hilt. "Galinar?" he whispered hopefully. Galinar's gruff reply had never been so welcome. "I should have known it was you, hero. How do you feel?" "Shaky," Larson admitted. "And blind?" A scene threaded through his mind. The memory of Silm lying still as death on a road in the Mekong Delta. "Where's Silm?" The sorceress called over the bubbling of the river Silg. "Here. The real question, Alarum, is where was Silm?" Larson groped towards Silm's voice. "My world. I'm sorry. I tried to control my memories. I swear I did, but—" Silm caught his arm. It occurred to Larson with frightening abruptness that the surrounding darkness was too complete for night. He finished with an anxious whine. "Damn it, why can't I see?" Galinar replied, "We're in the Valley of Darkness." "How?" "We carried you," Silm explained. "Brahmin can only track us through your mind. With you unconscious, we traveled as quickly as we could." Larson pulled Silm closer. "Why are we still headed toward Helvogrimer?" Galinar sounded nearer. "Because Loki expects us there. He wants your sword destroyed in the Hell Spring, and for all he knows, we plan to complete that quest. He'll be there to make certain it gets done." "Please, Alarum," Silm spoke with concern. "Talk with Vidar. Make certain he's all right after what happened." Reluctantly, Larson released Silm and drew Valvetnir. The sword quivered mournfully in his grip. Vidar's mental presence wound cautiously through the fragile tangles of his mind. "I pity your people. The men of your world removed all the glory from war and left only killing." Larson jammed the sword into its sheath and broke his link with Vidar. "He's fine," Larson grumbled. But the god's assessment echoed through his mind, awakening a terrifying thought. "When we complete this quest and the gods of Asgard no longer need me, what becomes of me? Will Frey return me to the skillless death machine of the Vietnam War?" With a strength born of imagined injustice, he jerked the sword free again. "Vidar?" The god answered defensively before Larson finished the question. "I don't know what Frey plans. My own fate is tenuous enough. Since my imprisonment, I know only what I see through your eyes." "Damn!" Larson dashed the sword to the ground. Its blue flare faded darkness in a circle of purple. Larson crushed Silm to his chest in frustration, and her dragon staff cracked painfully against his shoulder. His lips brushed her face, found her mouth, and pressed him into a passionate kiss. Desire burned him like fire, but he loosened his grip and fought bitterness. Silm, the success of this quest may doom us to separate worlds. Grief caught the words in his throat. There is a link between our worlds, even if it's only in my mind. We passed through it once. I swear, if Frey sends me back to Nam, I'll find a way to return to you. Larson heard the scrape of metal against sand as Silm hefted Valvetnir and returned the sword to its sheath. Or if necessary, I'll find you, she told him gently. It's not often I meet a hero like you. Galinar shuffled his feet and sand showered against Larson's ankles. Forgive me. If we don't move along soon, we forfeit whatever advantage we gained. Alarum. Larson felt a slight breeze of movement. A ration sack thumped into his side. He accepted the pouch and slung it over his shoulder. Where are the horses? They refuse to enter the valley. Galinar's voice came from some distance ahead. Animals can sense evil. Larson caught Silm's hand and trotted after the Kenzie. 2 days had passed since his last meal, but Larson felt no hunger. His stomach balled in an aching knot of tension. Soon he would face the greatest challenge of any life. He would become a Godslayer or damn his soul and Silm's to an eternity of torture. A victim of his own thoughts, Larson did not notice as darkness diffused to gray, but another in the party was more wary. Galinar stopped, silent in the mist, and caught his companions as they passed. Caution, he warned. We're approaching the Hell Spring. I hear the falling waters. Larson released Silm's hand and wiped slick palms on his cape. Beyond the gurglings of the river Silg, Larson heard a sound like a roomful of serpents. The air felt suddenly chill. For the first time since his recovery, Larson discerned huddled cliffs, which hems the Valley of Darkness. The river Silg spanned nearly 4 times its earlier width, and ice blocks as large as a man's head bobbed in its current. Galinar drew his katana and tested its edge with his thumbnail. Ready. Ready, repeated Larson incredulously. Ready? Loki's a god. Shouldn't we make a plan of some sort? His own words struck with mind-jarring force. We're fighting a god, like Christ or something. What chance do we have? Galinar sheathed the katana, trading it for his companion's sword. His hand slid along the blade, but Larson could not perceive the Kenzie's expression in the semi-darkness. I cut him. Silm throws spells, and you... Galinar paused thoughtfully. Bested the guard captain of Forsmar, before your first sword lesson. So, I guess you hit people too. Larson paced to hide his trembling hands. Look, he's not people, he's a god. Galinar walked toward the palisades, and his figure was lost to the hovering shadows of the Valley of Darkness. He can die just like we can. Silm caught for Larson's arm, but her hand slipped free in the sweat which slicked his limbs like grease. Loki's both a wizard and a swordsman, which gives him a large repertoire for attack. Plans become worthless against a god as unpredictable as his chaos, especially when one of the parties privy to the strategy can't hide his knowledge from the enemy. Larson nodded his understanding. Silm and Galinar might have plotted while he recovered from the Phantom's rocket, but anything they told him could be accessible to Loki, through the flaws in his mind. Doubt rushed down upon Larson, merciless as a volley of gunfire. I'm not prepared to war with gods. I may never be. A private in one of the bloodiest wars in history, and I've never even killed a man with my own hands. The murders of my conscience were all the impersonal and distant victims of an M16. Yet the gun he had wielded lay without guilt between the banks of a dried river in a body-littered jungle, while the screams of the dying haunted the memory of Al Larson. Larson stopped pacing and deliberately avoided touching Valvetnir. Alarum. Threat colored Galinar's words. Frey brought you to complete this quest at a price a mere mortal cannot comprehend. You will fight gods, I promise. Need I remind you that there are 3 gods of chaos and 15 of law? Choose your enemies with care. Larson fixed on the first numerical fact. 3 gods, he screamed, nearly hysterical. Silm clarified quickly. Loki's daughter, Hel, can't cross the bridge from her citadel. As for Halblindi... He's trapped in a sword too, Larson interrupted as he recalled Vidar's vision. Loki's sword. His hand dropped unconsciously to Valvetnir. Vidar's mental presence filled his mind like storm wind. Brahmin's sword, he corrected. And you should know something. Frey brought you here with full knowledge that the choice to face Loki must remain your own. I want freedom, but it's your right to know the gods of law are not vindictive. Slay Loki or not as your conscience sanctions. A moral decision will not be held against you. Vidar ended contact with Larson, though not quickly enough to hide the grief which lapped Larson's mind like a tide. Ready, said Larson softly. Resolved. He filled his lungs with air and exhaled through clenched teeth. Let's go. Silm followed Larson through the lightning mists of the valley. The cliffs ended abruptly. The river washed across a plain of dying grasses, then plummeted through a pit as large as a mine crater. Larsen strode from the valley, wind bitter as hoarfrost whipped hair into his eyes. Anyone but a native to the climate would have found it unbearably cold, but as a creature of fairy, Larsen was impervious. The rapid change from darkness to daylight made him blink. Larsen's eyes adjusted quickly. He recognized 10 similar valleys radiating from the central chasm, like the spokes of a giant wheel. Curious, he trotted forward. Weeds crushed the powder beneath his feet. The rush of waters through the pit grew loud as a lion's roar, and then faded as Larsen's ears adjusted to the noise. As he neared the edge of the cliff, he found a narrow path, which threaded into the abyss. Poised at his lip, he saw a sight more breathtaking than the Falls of Niagara. 11 rivers plunged as one through the rounded crater, their waters wound in a shimmering braid. The pittance of light which pierced the clouds drew glittering lines through the tar and crashing into the hellspring. Droplets bounced upward in a frozen mist and pelted Larsen's face like hail. Entranced, he took a step forward. A stone broke loose beneath his feet. He went giddy as he imagined himself tumbling with it, weaving through the cascade, smashed to lifeless, soulless waste beneath Hvelgrimr's current. A shiver traversed Larsen. He shielded his eyes and shied away just as Silm bellowed, "Loki!" Her voice echoed above the many valleys. "We know you're here. If you want Valvatnir and Hvelgrimr, come get him." Larsen whirled and freed his sword, edging nervously from the hellspring. Galinar waited near the valley. Silm stood ready in the center of the plain. Her challenge went unanswered. "Loki!" Silm started again. Brahmin glided from the waning fog of Sulg's valley, black as oblivion. The winds of the waterfall swirled iron-gray robes about his torso. His eyes flashed red threat from shadowed sockets. The diamond in his staff glowed bright as a street lamp. "Did you think Loki would waste energy on you?" As he spoke, a sunburst of sorceries blossomed in his hand. "You're scarcely worth my time." Galinar moved first. Fast as thought, his fingers freed a shuriken. Even as he tensed his arm to throw, Brahmin's enchantments sheeted through the air. A raw blaze of magic enwrapped the Kensi in a glimmering net, which held him still as stone. "No!" screamed Silm. Light pulsed across the plain as wizard and sorceress howled spell words, forceful as explosions. Brahmin's diamond blazed through a chaotic spectrum of color. His raging red eyes locked suddenly on Larsen, and Silm loosed a short scream. Her tone changed abruptly. A beam of ruddy light leaped from Brahmin's fingers. Silm's magical parry pinwheeled protectively before Larsen. Brahmin cursed, then laughed as his spells shattered to colored highlights. Sunbright sorcery surrounded both dragon rank mages in a wave which blinded Larsen. Light blazed and died, magics fizzled. Silm dropped to her knees as Larsen lunged at Brahmin. Valvatnir arced over Larsen's head and sliced toward the half-breed. In a single motion, Brahmin dropped his staff, drew his sword, and blocked. 6 inches of air separated the swords when they stopped abruptly. The motion jarred both wielders. The half-breed riposted. Larsen jerked his blade upward in instinctive defense. Brahmin's sword shied awkwardly from Valvatnir, as if on its own accord. Larsen and Brahmin recovered together. In the brief respite, Vidar's presence imparted a panicked message. "Helblindi and I are prisoners of the same spell. A touch will destroy us both." Conditioned, Larsen repeated the first maneuver Galinar had taught him. Valvatnir whistled reluctantly around him and lanced toward Brahmin. Brahmin sprang forward as he blocked. The swords quivered, desperate inches apart. Too close for an adequate sweep, the half-breed retreated. "Drop me, damn you!" Vidar's command pierced Larsen's mind with painful force. Larsen responded with a desperate thought. "Drop you and die! I can't face Brahmin weaponless!" Brahmin thrust. Larsen waved Valvatnir before his body, and Helblindi sprang aside. Brahmin swung low. Larsen withdrew his front foot, but the hellblade scraped skin from his calf. Larsen swore, deaf to Vidar's pleas. Again he sprang at Brahmin and skipped back as the half-breed returned his strike. Apology rolled through his mind in waves. Vidar gathered mental strength, dragged Larsen's consciousness with him in a short conspiracy with Helblindi. Larsen's breath came in wild sobs. He repositioned his sword, just in time to block a sweep for his neck. Vidar tore free of his grip and tumbled through the air like a wounded bird. To Larsen's relief, Helblindi also pitched from its wielder's hand. Brahmin paused a moment in shock, then retreated across the plain. Larsen noticed a sharp sting of ice pellets on the back of his neck, and only just realized how close Brahmin had maneuvered him to a fatal plunge into the hellspring. Cautiously, he came forward to face the sorcerer in the dying grasses. Over Brahmin's wide black shoulders, he saw Silm watching with wide-eyed helplessness. She mouthed a silent message. I love you. Beyond her, Galinar stood motionless as a painting. Brahmin lashed, backhanded at Larson's face. The elf blocked with his left arm. Before he could return the strike, Brahmin closed. The half-breed's foot kicked painfully against the back of Larson's knee, and his elbow crashed against Larson's chin. Larson staggered, recovered. As Brahmin realigned, Larson sprang and punched. Brahmin blocked effortlessly. His dark fist smashed Larson's nose. Larson lurched as sparks danced before his eyes. Dizzied with nausea, he tried to think. Brahmin's maneuvers came with practiced speed and machine-like efficiency. Larson knew he could never avoid the blows. He could only hope to endure. Resolved, he jabbed at Brahmin's face. Again the half-breed blocked and returned the strike. This time, Larson took the punch. Pain exploded across his jaw, but he bore it on his enemy. His knee crashed into Brahmin's groin. The half-breed gasped. Silm screamed. Larson's elbow thrust toward Brahmin's head. The half-elf ducked, using Larson's own momentum to hurl him to the ground. Brahmin's foot lashed out, passing over Larson's head as the elf rolled to his feet. Several yards away, Silm rolled in the grass as if in pain. Brahmin's features twisted in a savage smile. His hands rested peacefully at his sides as he raised his face to Larson. Go ahead, hero. He spat the last word in contempt. Hit me. Larson did not need prompting. Brahmin made no attempt at defense. Larson's fist smashed into his face, and Silm shrieked in agony. Stunned, Larson did not press his advantage. Blood trickled from Brahmin's nose, but his mouth parted in silent laughter. Hit me again, elf coward. Malice danced in his feral eyes. Hurt Silm. With a cry of anger, Larson struck. Cartilage snapped beneath his knuckles, jarring Brahmin to his knees. Silm howled in torment. Her body writhed in the dirt. Alarmed, Larson started toward her. Silm? As Brahmin rose and advanced, Larson turned back to the fight. What have you done to her? He demanded. Hysteria raised his voice an octave. Blood colored Brahmin's mouth scarlet. I did nothing, he replied triumphantly. He flicked blood from his cheek. But every time you mar this pretty face, you injure hers as well. Larson retreated defensively, afraid to strike. Brahmin swept forward. His left foot drove into Larson's gut with a force which doubled him over. As Brahmin completed his spin, his right foot jolted against Larson's head. Larson rolled clumsily, awaiting a death stroke which never fell. Confidence made Brahmin patient as a cat. He explained while Larson struggled dizzily to his feet. To save you from my sorceries, Silm linked her life aura to mine. She holds our magic inoperative, but our souls are fused. Her fate and mine have become one. Brahmin faked a foot strike. As Larson dodged, Brahmin delivered a brazenly high kick. His heel slammed against Larson's forehead. Impact snapped Larson's neck rearward. The backside of his skull struck the ground first. Darkness swam down on him. Larson shook his throbbing head, watching Brahmin's retreating back through a veil of colored mist. Fury gave Larson renewed strength. He charged Brahmin's back, just as the sorcerer bent for his L-sword. Larson punched. Brahmin wheeled. His elbow caught Larson in the gut. The half-breed seized Larson's outstretched arm and hurled the elf over his shoulder. Accustomed to wrestling, Larson struck the ground unhurt. Brahmin knelt beside him, pinning his right wrist to the ground. Larson rocked toward the half-breed, wrapped his left arm about one dark leg, and rolled. Brahmin flipped to the ground. Even as he landed, Larson reversed direction. The force pitched Brahmin to his stomach, hands trapped beneath his chest. Larson pressed his full weight against the half-breed. His one hand clutched the swarthy wrist. His forearm thrust Brahmin's face in the dirt. Silm screamed between panting gasps. Kill him, Alarum! Forget me! Kill him! Larson jolted his fist against the back of Brahmin's skull, cursing himself for Silm's pained whimper. He released Brahmin and seized Halblindi's hilt before the half-breed could do anything more than roll to his back. Larson spun and pressed a blade to Brahmin's throat. The sorcerer went still. His face drained of color, his chest heaved. If you kill me, you kill Silm too, Brahmin warned in a reedy whine. Larson's hands shook. Sick with worry, he called over his shoulder. Is it true? Silm made no reply. Larson twisted toward the sorceress. Damn you! Is it true? Yes, she whispered. It's true, but... Brahmin clawed to his feet and ran. Galinar's training resurfaced mechanically. Larson struck. Halblindi's blade carved through Brahmin's hamstring. The muscle curled into a ball. Brahmin collapsed. Larson finished the strike from habit, gained from hours of practice. He thrust a blade through Brahmin's chest. The half-breed quivered, then fell limp, and Silm's dying scream reverberated in accusation. Anguish tore denial from Larson's throat. No! No! He ripped Helblindi free and cast it aside in wild sorrow. Blood splashed as the blade tumbled awkwardly to the ground, and Larsen fell with it. Grief-mad, he howled like a wounded animal and crawled to Sylm's prone form. She lay like a marble carving beneath the blade which imprisoned her god. Larsen dropped to her side. She was cold as ice and every bit as still. Tears burned his eyes like poison, cleaning tracks through the blood which stained his chin. His gaze fell upon the motionless Kensi, and he howled anguished curses at the swordmaster, who had drilled him until the sword figure which killed Sylm became reflex. Larsen's sanity crumbled to a muddle of thought. His fist struck the ground with a force which jarred his arm to the shoulder. His second blow landed against Valventnir's blade. Its sharpened edge slit the side of his hand. Oblivious to physical pain, Larsen caught the sword by its hilt. Vidar filled his mind with warning. "Alarum! Behind you!"